Good day, Africa, and welcome to AAU Talks here on AAU TV. And today I am your host, and my name is Kwesi Sam. I am with the Directorate of Research and Academic Planning here at the Association of African Universities. And today on AAU Talks, I have three wonderful guests who have joined me, and we are going to discuss a very important topic, a very important issue, where we have a lot of education stakeholders discussing it, and we are looking at how together we can achieve inclusive education in Africa. And so if you are with us and you've joined us via our social media platforms, AAU, that is Association of African Universities, you can also join the conversation by logging onto our Twitter page, that is AAU_67, and we are live and we are discussing issues concerning inclusive education and how we can ensure that together in the higher education space we will be able to look at this innovative topic and how we can achieve the SDG 4. And so I'm going to introduce my guests to you shortly, and I have with me the first, Mrs. Angela Afran. And Mrs. Angela Afran is the Regional Director for Africa, Perkins International. You are welcome, Mrs. Afran.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
Good.
Great. We are also privileged to have in the studio Dr. Peter Obeng Asamoah, and Dr. Peter Obeng Asamoah is the Executive Director for the Ghana Blind Union. Doc, you are welcome.
Thank you.
Great. How are you doing, Doc?
Fine.
Great. We also have the third guest, and she is in the person of Miss Elizabeth Agbeto, and she is the Programs Manager, Inclusion, also with the Ghana Blind Union. You are welcome, madam.
Thank you.
Great. So we are looking at this very important topic, inclusive education with people with disability. And I was so much fascinated to read that in Africa we have 60 to 80 million people with disability. And so it is very much important that as a higher education institution, we look at this topic very much deeper to ensure that at the end of the day, we don't leave anybody behind, just as the SDG goals, specifically the goal 4 talks about. But let me start with Doc, with the discussion. If we are talking about inclusive education, and then we are looking at people with disability, first of all, who is a person with disability?
Thank you very much, and greetings to all the viewers. Yes, now when we talk about a person with disability, to really understand the concept, let me just delve into some etymology, a little etymology here.
Okay.
When you look at the word disability, let's break it down. Disability. If, let me give an example by starting with another word, like comfort. Mm-hmm. If somebody is comfortable, the person has comfort. If you take away the comfort, he's in a state of discomfort. Comfort. If somebody is armed, he has guns, and you take away the guns from the person, you have disarmed the person.
Okay.
Now, so if somebody has an ability to do something, and for some reason that ability is taken away, it becomes a disability.
Okay.
So that is the basis for disability. So if somebody is able to read, and for some reason the ability to read is taken away from the person, then the person has now acquired a disability.
Okay.
So disability would refer to something that hampers that ability which you have to perform. So if that performance ability is curtailed or hampered in a way, then you can say the person has a disability. So disability, as it were, is more on the things that are around us that prevents us from doing what we can do. So I'll go deeper here now. Okay. If I'm able to use my computer to read a book, when it comes to reading, I wouldn't say I'm disabled because I'm able to read. Good. But using a different ability to achieve that, right? So I've achieved it. But if I'm in a situation where my ability to read is totally hampered, it's totally cut off, then I have a disability situation. So disability is a very generic term,
Okay.
and it can be used to apply to not just the physical or biological situation, but also our condition, our social condition, and even environment in which we find ourselves.
Okay.
Yes.
Doc, let me come back to you again. And so it means that disability is not specific.
No, disability is not limited
Okay.
to like one or two particular ranges, but it depends on the situation which you find yourself. It depends on the environment in which you find yourself.
Okay.
It depends on the things that hamper you to function as you would like to function. So if somebody maybe has only one limb, maybe like it's one arm, and that person is not able to function as he wants to function, then you could say that the person has a disability. But if that person is still able to function okay, is still able to achieve what the person wants to achieve, is still able to do what he wants to, then that ability is still there.
Okay.
But anything that hampers that, I'll just give you one short, because I know we're running time. If somebody wants to climb steps into this building, and the person has a ramp, and the wheelchair can just go over it and enter the building, then there's no disability there.
And the person is not disabled.
Yes, entered. But if the person has to go on a wheelchair and is met by a flight of steps,
Okay.
then that ability to enter the room has been curtailed, and then we have a problem there.
Great. Let me come to Mrs. Agbeto. Do you have anything to add, especially if I have one limb off and I'm able to walk? Will I call myself a disabled person?
No, you are not disabled per se if you are able to walk, or you have something that we say assistive device that is able to assist you to walk. So to add to what Doc has just explained, disability actually is not just the limitation to perform some
An
specific
activity.
functions,
Okay.
but maybe some of the barriers that society puts on the way of persons who are disabled.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Then let's go a bit deeper, even to look at what are what is the major spectrum? What are the categories of disability that we have, Mrs. Afran?
Thank you, Kwesi. We have various categories of disabilities, and I know we have about 13 or 14, but I will just mention a few of them. Of course, Doc is sitting next to me, so I will
You
start
add
with persons with visual impairment, which is one. And then under visual impairment, we will have those who are blind and those with low vision. We talk about that a lot. And then we have those with hearing loss.
Okay.
And when we talk about those with hearing loss, we look at those who are deaf and those who are hard of hearing. And those who are hard of hearing, normally they use
The hearing
the
aid.
hearing aid.
Oh.
Of late, some of them even have what we call the cochlear implant to ensure that they can also hear because of surgery. We have others who have multiple disabilities, so they have more than one disability. We have those who are deaf-blind.
Deaf and blind at the same time.
Exactly,
Okay.
deaf-blind. Then we have autism, you know, it's a key thing that people talk about. We have those with other health impairments, and when we talk about other health impairments, somebody who has asthma falls under that category of other health impairment. Then we have those who have traumatic brain injury. So, you know, somebody can just bump the head into something or have an accident, and then that thing comes about. We have those with cerebral palsy and all those that some of them mostly fall under multiple disabilities and autism and all that. So, and those with physical disabilities, of course, you talked about the wheelchair and others. So those are some of the categories. I said I'm not going to mention all, but these are some of the categories that we have. I guess Doc or Lizzie can add.
No,
on, but
maybe
these
we
are-
have those with albinism.
Oh,
They are
albino.
also classified
under
as
Yeah.
persons
visual
with
impairments.
disability.
Yeah.
They have visual conditions and skin conditions
Conditions,
as
okay.
well. Yeah. So I don't know whether we can classify them
They
as
fall
those
under
with
visual impairment.
visual.
Okay.
Yeah.
Doctor, is there any other?
No, but just let me clarify something. I like your example about the limb and whether you're disabled.
Yes.
You know, it's like this. If you have, let's say, one limb, are you disabled or not? What do you want to do with that limb? Do you want to run? Or do you want to stroll? Or do you want to jump? Do you want to run? You understand? So if, well, you have one limb and you also just to lie in bed from morning to evening, then you don't really have a problem. You have a problem when you want to get up and walk on your own,
Yes.
unaided, when you need assistive devices. You have a problem when you want to run, when you want to go up steps, when you want to jump over something, then you have a problem. And that is where your ability has been impaired.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Let's also look at, there are a lot of misconceptions surrounding disability. People tend to think that if you are disabled, it is as a result of some spiritual attacks or your mother kind of maybe made a statement when she was pregnant, and then the evil spirit or the gods or the goddesses around have really picked up on you as a child. What are some of the misconceptions about disability, and how can we disabuse the mind of people around these misconceptions? Doc?
Well, I think, coming from our traditional situation, our traditional cultural situation, where in that context, you tend to ascribe things to curses and violation of taboos and all that. Yes, and people tend to have those negative perceptions of disability. Like, this may be the cause, that may be the cause. And also because generally the African, by our nature, we tend to be very religious. So things that we cannot understand in the physical, we tend to interpret as having spiritual causes.
Okay.
But I think the issue is when people begin to understand things more, then we begin to now know that these things do not really have spiritual causes, that these things are physical, these things are social, they're all around us. So it is really ignorance, lack of information, and let's say the basic religious or cultural situation that many people who may be uninformed find themselves in.
Okay. So, Mr. Frank, what are some of the causes of disability?
Okay. So I'll take it from what we call the perinatal, which is like before birth, the prenatal, which is prenatal before birth, the perinatal, during and then the postnatal causes. With the prenatal causes, I will look at like a pregnant mother who is smoking. Definitely, some way, somehow, it will affect that child who is in, or the fetus in the womb. If you take alcohol, definitely during pregnancy, you don't expect to give birth to a child who, I wouldn't use the word normal, but a child who is.
You may have fetal syndromes.
Yes, other issues. If you are supposed to have antenatal, because you go to hospital, they give you medication, to support you. And if you don't take your medication, that might affect, the child when the child is born. We have what we call blood incompatibility. Sometimes the blood is not compatible, the two of you. So of late, you could see that even some churches are saying you have to go and take a test, do this, bring it, and then they try to advise. People don't listen. So at the end of the day, because of love, but then, if that is incompatible, it will also affect that baby. And then we have what we call chromosomal abnormalities. 23 pairs. If it's not there, that will also do that. Then in the perinatal, we are talking about...
Before you go to the perinatal, does maternal depression, maternal stress also cause...
in fact, you are very right. It does cause. Because if you are going through challenges, even... I always say that it's good to have a free mind, and just enjoy, that pregnancy too. But if you don't have support from your family, from your spouse. You go through stress. You need to buy things you are not getting, even having food to eat. If you are not getting the right amount with all the vitamins and other things, that would also pose a lot of challenges. And all the stress these days, you know, causes a lot of...
The traffic stress and everything.
everything, so that can also pose a challenge.
In the workplace.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
The
I think
workplace,
let's really take it a step forward. Looking at, you mentioned the three, the prenatal,
Yes.
the perinatal, and the postnatal.
Yes.
Let's look at the prenatal first, and then understand it, so that the viewers would know that it is not as a result of any spiritual influence or effect, but these things that we neglect during the prenatal stages really can determine the fate of the baby that you give birth to.
Exactly.
Miss Alberto, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. The prenatal, maybe pregnancy nutrition for the mother. If you are not able to eat the right diet,
Okay.
you may end up having a disabled child, because the nutrient, the required nutrient that the child needs to mature properly is lacking.
Okay.
So that's why you have it. And then, like she indicated, the alcohol, taking of alcohol. I think this time, Ghana Brewery and other alcohol companies are trying to advocate mothers or women of childbearing age to stay away from alcohol when they are pregnant. So that's one can cause it. And then I think Angela mentioned almost everything.
Okay.
The incompatibility, the racial factor, even the sickles. There are lots of them that cause the deformity in the baby.
All right.
Yeah.
You are still watching AAU Talks here on AAU TV, and today we are just discussing a very important topic: inclusive education, specifically people with disabilities. And you can join the conversation by visiting our Facebook page, Association of African Universities. You can also join us via Twitter at AAU_67, and we are live discussing this very relevant issue. After the commercial break, we'll look at the perinatal and also look at the postnatal, these causal factors that attribute to the fate of babies who are born with disability.
African Universities and a projects officer. I bring you the research workshop, which is entitled Innovative and Quality Research for the 21st Century. This research workshop is very important because we are looking at the new methods of data collection and other aspects of research which are just contemporary. And this is a grand opportunity for you to come aboard. We will have this workshop in Zimbabwe at the Zimbabwe Open University building, Samora Machel Avenue, on the 28th to the 31st of May 2018. You are all invited, researchers, lecturers, students, those in non-governmental organizations, and anyone who feels like retooling their research skills and information. The mode of delivery is face-to-face, and we are going to have a competent facilitators for this workshop. I will also be one of the facilitators, and I hope from my continental exposure, you will also benefit a lot from what I gathered through the different countries that we have in Africa. The fee that is being charged for this event in 4 days, it's 350 for Zimbabweans, the locals. Internationals, we have 2 categories. Those who are non-AAU members, they pay $450, and those who are AAU members, they pay $400. I'm talking in terms of US dollars. And in addition to that, you will get a certificate, which is something we all need for recognition. But this registration fee does not cover transport from your area or even accommodation. These are personal arrangements. It will only cover the conference expenses. Thank you.
Welcome from that quick commercial break. And before we left for the commercial break, we were discussing the perinatal stages of disability, or the causal factors of disability. And I still have in the studio my guests, the three wonderful people who are just doing justice to the topic. But let me come back to Doc, still on the prenatal stages. It means it is so much amazing that sometimes we tend to attribute just these little things to spiritual issues. But they are very things that we neglect as pregnant women or as couples during pregnancy.
Yeah, you see, like I mentioned earlier on, you know, sometimes these are basic health things that, you know, there's a lot of public education about. Go to antenatal, take your drugs, don't take alcohol, refrain from smoking. And people still go ahead and do these things. And they fail to see the connection between these things and the children that they give birth to.
Okay.
And like I indicated earlier, and because most people tend to explain what they don't understand in the mundane, the physical, they don't understand it. They tend to explain the things they don't understand in a spiritual context. And so then they begin to see these children or disability as a result of a curse of a god. I remember there's a saying that says, a witch cried last night and the boy was born blind today.
Oh.
Who doesn't know that the boy was born blind was caused by the witch? You see? So, you know, there's these notions. And then there's this notion about children of the gods.
Yes.
And certain people, especially like those with albinism, for example, many of them see them as spirits. They say they don't even die. They just vanish.
They vanish.
You know, so there are a lot of these negative concepts that people attribute to persons with disability. Some people even think disability is contagious. So when a child has a disability and goes to school, you see parents of the children who don't have disability being very concerned and being very worried.
Don't play with them.
Don't play with this child. You might get someone with disability. Or maybe the child is going to play with blind children and he comes home and he has an eye infection.
Oh.
And then the parent makes a connection between, you see, the eye infection and playing with blind children. You know, so it's this kind of ignorance and the need for information that causes a lot of these negative perceptions.
Okay. And even to add on, what about, you know, when you're going to even get married in a traditional settings, they would be looking out for some of these things in the family, and if they're rare, they wouldn't allow you to also, as in, go into that family to marry. I don't know if you're familiar with such.
Oh, I'm very familiar. You know, I'm a blind person myself.
Yes.
And when I was going to get married, well, there were a lot of questions that were raised. You see, about because at that time, most people have a picture of disability, which is one of somebody who is uninformed, which is somebody who is by the roadside begging, somebody who is uneducated, you know. So that was a picture that most people have in their minds. But fortunately for me, and by God's grace, the family which I was marrying my wife from have a level of enlightenment.
Okay.
So they were able to look at the situation. But then friends and distant relatives in the background always had their consent.
Okay.
Yeah. They tend to see they tend to view disability negatively. And also people also tend to view disability as inability, right?
Yes.
Because you're disabled, you cannot. Because you're disabled, certain things are beyond you. You see, and so they don't see a bright future for anybody who is disabled. So why would you commit your daughter to marry somebody like that? Because a disabled person, in their view, is somebody who cannot achieve
Anything at all.
Yes. they tend to see disabled people as people who don't even have any aspirations in life. So then what is the person going to do? You understand?
Okay.
So that is a thing that I think as progressive society, we have to combat and know that persons with disability are people just like anybody else, are people who also have aspiration, goals, and objectives in life.
Okay.
And they have the ability to achieve them if they have the requisite support.
Support.
And facilities. Yes.
Yeah, before we go to the perinatal, let me come to Mrs. Alberto
To add to the
to add up to the perceptions, the misconceptions that we have about disability.
Okay. I think since we are on the marriage issue, I may want to add few perceptions that
Okay.
people have out there concerning persons with disability. People even think if you are disabled, you don't have feelings for sex. So the marrying is a challenge. And then again, they think if you are disabled, you can't give birth. I met a lady who is physically disabled, all the legs,
Legs
and
out,
yeah.
okay.
And then she said when she was moving out with the boyfriend, the family of the boyfriend said, if you go in for this, are you not sure you are going to give birth to children who don't have
Legs
legs?
also.
Yeah. So those are some of the things. And then the fact that it's like they sympathize with them. Oh, this person you are a wicked man. How do you go in for this lady? You are just complicating the situation.
For
So
her,
those
okay.
are some of the perceptions out there
Okay.
that, I mean, if you are disabled, you can't do anything for yourself. And people just have to pity you, sympathize with your situation.
Not empathize.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are...
I think I am enjoying the discussion myself, and I believe that the viewers are also going to really learn a lot from this. But let's come back to you, Mrs. Afran, so that you take us through the perinatal causal factors.
Okay, so I'm just going to pick maybe two things. Under the perinatal, we look at prolonged labor. You know, at least of late we have the cesarean, so a lot of people might not want to go through that. But then, you know, we are a developing continent, and so we still have people who are really marginalized and
areas,
people
yes.
who are in the rural areas. And when people want to give birth, they say, oh, it's not yet time, sit at home, wait a little. Even when the water breaks, they would still tell you, stay a little. And you know, it keeps prolonging. By the time you even get to the hospital, there might have been a complication. And so push. At the end of the day, the baby is already tired inside the womb.
A lot of stress.
A lot of stress, so that can cause that. Another thing is lack of oxygen. You know, when the baby comes out and there is the need for oxygen and the baby lacks it, if we don't get it instantly, that will also cause a form of disability. And even when you are pushing and the baby's head ends up bumping against the bed or something, if the nurse is not careful enough.
Not even able to pull the baby
Not
well.
even to be able to pull the baby well. No, people use the forceps sometimes, even to pull the head. All these things might, you know, pose a challenge. So
I don't know. We need to be extra careful with some of these things that
Yes.
we normally joke with.
so,
Yes.
yes.
Great.
So.
Let me come to Doc. Doc, is there any other thing on the perinatal?
Oh no, I think
Okay.
Anja has done justice to the
To the
subject.
then
yes.
let's go to the postnatal. After the baby comes out, what are some of the causal factors?
One is accident, of course, can also
Sure.
cause that. The other thing is that we are preaching immunization. Immunize your children against the 6 killer diseases. People are not doing it, and we have a lot of examples of people who have disabilities who had measles, you know, and became blind, or somebody just had any of these other 6 killer diseases, rubella, and all these other things, and they end up having a disability. So I think it's very vital that we immunize the children against the 6 killer diseases. We also need to look at nutrients. You know, we talk about breastfeeding the child for 6 months and all other things. I think the doctors know better and the health professionals know You know, research has also shown that when you breastfeed the child, is very important for the health of that child or just building that child up. And so I think these are a few of the things that we need to do, even as a mother, the mother breastfeeding the child. You also need to eat good food, just like Elizabeth said, so that together we can build a strong immune system
For the
for
baby.
that baby.
Okay,
So.
thank you very much. We want to move into inclusive education, but since Doug is a blind person, or he's blind, we want to find out from him specifically, at what point did you know you couldn't see just as every other child? Was it through, was it by birth, or it was postnatal that you found? And how was growing up, especially going to school from the kindergarten, the basic school, how was it like for you before we move even into the higher education space for you?
Well, I I lost my sight somewhere along the educational path. So I mean, like, I wasn't born blind, or I didn't have blindness when I was in the junior schools. Like, I was actually, I was in secondary school.
Okay.
And so, and it was, I remember it was just before my final year exams. So I was about 18 years old. So I was quite, okay. So, yeah, so losing my sight at that time was very dramatic. I mean, you know, you have to go through a lot of psychological stress. And I might add that it wasn't only for me as a blind person, but my family. My entire family were stressed out along with me. My parents, I would say, were more confused than I was. And we had to resort to medical. We had to do a lot of up and down to various hospitals. And then at the end of the day, we had to turn to rehabilitation, where we had a lot of counseling. And then since, by God's grace, my parents were enlightened, then we look at going back to school. So education then became a very vibrant option. And so I went to school. At that time, we really didn't have inclusion as it is now. It was more like integration. So I went to a secondary school where blind students were being integrated into the process. And then I had to fit myself into that situation. And I can say it was extremely challenging, especially for somebody who was newly blinded, you see. So, and then I had to learn Braille over there, and the facilities were next to nothing. So then you had to rely on the benevolence of people around you to read, to walk around, yes, and learn things the hard way. I mean, you learn that your shirt is dirty by wearing it, and for somebody pointing at and asking you very, I don't want to say silly questions, but things like, why are you wearing a dirty shirt? You see, and then you get to know that, then your clothes are, so those are the things that you begin to learn, and then learn things the hard way, and from other blind persons around. So how to listen for echoes when you are lost, how to listen for vibrations between walls to tell you where you are, and all those things. So you picked up those skills, and then also you had the other senses being sharpened, like my sense of hearing, and then my memory. Those two things were very well sharpened. You know, it's a thing. You had to depend more on hearing and more on remembering things. So, and then your sense of feeling, your touch. But it became very sensitive. So with that, I was able to go through, I went to secondary school, and then I passed the exams for the university. But then again, you got to the university situation, and then because there was no real inclusion, limited as to which courses you could do. So it wasn't a matter of interest.
You had to just
it was a matter of convenience now. Which courses you are allowed to pursue. So I was limited in that particular way, and there too, our challenges there was a university. But I must say that at that level, you know, I had begun to change my outlook in life. I began to see things differently, and determination also began to develop more in me. I began to develop more self-confidence.
Okay.
And then I began to get new aspirations, to forge new aspirations and new goals in life.
Okay.
And then I was able to make it through that. God was always with me, I should say.
Yeah.
Yes, I pray a lot. I'm a very religious person. I pray a lot. And I went through that one. And I did my first degree. And I served as a teaching assistant at the University of Ghana.
Okay.
And then I did a second degree over there in research history. And then I tried to do a PhD. But one thing that, because at that time it was not an inclusive situation. So you really didn't have the facilities that will help you cope.
Support you.
Yes.
Okay.
So I can say that I can beat my chest and say that because of that, when I finished school, one of my main goals was to introduce ICT to blind persons, because over there I really wanted to use that, but I couldn't because there was no provision for that.
Okay.
And by God's grace, ICT has been introduced. I can say that I was able to do that with the support of my colleagues at work and a few other groups also. They came together and we brought in computers, and now blind students in this country have ICT.
Wow.
Yes.
That's excellent. But let me come to you, Miss Agbeto. You have worked in the space of people with disability for a very long time. How do you relate to those experience, especially from the primary school? What are the challenges they face? What are some of the troubles they go through going to school? And what are the personal experiences you could share?
Okay, the troubles they go through in school, they are numerous. One is the required devices that they need to use in study, maybe either at individual levels or even in the classrooms. We have situations where braille sheets, that is the only paper that they use
write.
in writing, are very, very limited. So whilst their sighted colleagues, I'm talking specifically in terms of visual impairment.
Okay.
Whilst their sighted colleagues have access papers, notebooks, they can write letters even to their friends.
They are
Learners with visual impairment don't have that luxury of getting papers to write even to their colleagues. The papers they give them are counted in the classroom. Aside that, access to information, like Doc rightly mentioned, you go to the classroom and then the sighted colleagues have textbooks, even storybooks to read. I think last month we went around, we were just trying to educate them on the Marrakesh Treaty. And I asked in the school, how many of you have read storybooks before? And believe you me, none. They have never read storybooks in their lives.
Is it not because the storybooks are not
They are not
written,
there. So one guy just said, oh, okay, he had a colleague, narrating some story of Peggy Opon. So because he was interested, he has to plead with that person to narrate the story to him.
Okay.
So those are the challenges. Even the writing frames, they are very, very limited. You can't talk about the Perkins machines or the braillets they use. Somebody like Doc, who is late blind, may find it difficult and challenging to go back to learn the braille before coming to use it to write exams. But the Perkins is somehow very easy to learn, to learn and then make it easier for them to cope fast. But it's very expensive. And the education service is not able to provide it in the required number.
Okay.
So those are the challenges. Those with low vision, you can't talk about them. Because in Ghana now, if you are low vision students, you are treated as totally blind. Because the facilities are not there. The magnifiers, the hand magnifiers, the large prints, they are not available. I went to a school and they said inclusive school. And then I met a boy who is low vision, and I asked him, so what are the provisions that the school is able to make for you? And he said, oh, what they do is when I get to a class, they ask the teacher to assist by bringing my chairs to the front, then I can sit there.
And
So
that's
that
all.
when the teacher is writing, I'll be able to see on the board. And then I ask, so what about if you are not able to see? If I'm not able to see, I just ask people to read. And then I asked of the exam. He said they don't print his materials in large. So he still relies on people to read for him. So those are the challenges.
All right. Now, let me come to you, Mrs. Afran. Looking at the SDG 4, which states that we need to ensure inclusive and equitable education and lifelong learning for all. And I like the word for all. It means that everybody, education must be accessible to everybody, no matter your status, background, or whatever. And looking at the challenges that we've already outlined, how is inclusive education a reality?
You know, I'm a teacher myself,
Okay.
and I've worked at the School for the Blind for quite some time. And so I really agree with all the information that Doc and Lizzie have put out there. Those are the challenges we have. One of the things we have to know is that education is a human right.
Sure.
And so every child needs to have access because it is their right. And that is one thing we need to look at. We have what we call the UNCRPD, the United Nations Convention on the Right of Persons with Disabilities. It is out there. It's also talking about, you know, including, when I talk about us, I also work with children with disabilities and persons with disabilities. So it is fully out there. Now here we are with Sustainable Development Goal. Most governments have signed up for it. I would even say maybe all, but most have signed up for it. And we are looking at Agenda 2030. And when you look at inclusive, as you are saying, and I'll give you an example. In Ghana, we have passed the inclusive education policy. In there, we are talking about mild to moderate.
Okay.
So you see that even in that, we have moved away from those who are severe
And profound.
and profound. However, I know that inclusion is a process.
Okay.
It's just not an event, it's just a process. So I understand that we have to start from somewhere to ensure that we achieve that aim. But things are not working well, and we need to ensure that we put systems in place. I know UNICEF is supporting to drive
The process.
in most countries around the globe. And that is one thing that we are looking at, that all other agencies need to ensure and support, especially governments. If you sign up for something, don't just let it be you appending your signature to something, but ensure that at the end of the day, we implement and enforce whatever we have signed up for,
Okay.
so that we can achieve that aim
All
or
right.
target.
So, Doc, let me come to you. I really want to understand inclusive education. What is inclusive education? What must be done? And what does it take to ensure that we get to the 2030 goal?
Well, when we're talking about inclusive education, then we are talking about the education system meeting the specific needs of the learner,
Okay.
the learner with special needs. So if somebody is blind or is visually impaired, and the person cannot read a book, then the system must make it such that that book is in a format
That is
that
readable.
person can read, he can access it. Because that is the only way. If somebody is in a wheelchair and the person needs to get to the classroom, then the system should be such that the person should maybe have a ramp or a way of getting to the classroom. You see, and let me just make a distinction here. You know, when I was speaking about my experience, I talked about listen, a system where I went to, like the integrated system.
Yes.
There, I was made to adapt and adapt myself to the system as existed. So if I need to read, then it was up to me to look for somebody to read to me and to put it on my tape and to do that and do that. But now we're talking about a system that takes
Care of this.
care of the needs
Okay.
of the blind, so that is part of the planning process. So when you are planning to put up an educational institution or a school, you make provision. You ask certain questions. If I put up this library, how do people with visual impairment
Access
access
it.
all the material in this library? Is it going to be digital? Is it going to be online? Is it going to be braille? How are they going to do it? How are people going to go to the lavatory if they're in a wheelchair? If they can't hear, how can they sit in this classroom and access that information from the teachers? So when we talk about inclusive education, it is a system that meets the needs of the learners. If it doesn't meet the need of the learners, then it's not really inclusive. And that has to be, and that is possible if that is catered for at the planning stage.
Okay.
We don't want a system where you begin the system and then people have to play catch up. That becomes a problem because you may not always have to. But now, if you're planning, if you're going to train teachers, so from their training aspect, you are putting this thing to them. If you are planning your library, if you are planning your landscape, if you are planning your environment, if you are planning all the facilities, you take into cognizance that there will be people who may have to access these things differently. Okay, so that would be inclusive education.
All right. Let me come to you, Ms. Alberto. So what is the landscape in Ghana like in terms of inclusive education? Do we have the resources? Do we have schools that are really paying attention to this new idea of bringing everybody to school and providing for all of them despite their various needs that they have?
I would say for now, no. No, because you know the Disability Act was passed 10 years ago.
Okay.
And it has given that period for buildings to be modified so that people who are using wheelchair and other things could access the buildings. Even when you go to the ministry in charge, responsible for social protection, persons with disability cannot access the offices of the officers there, the ministers, whatever it is. You go to the schools, even the new school buildings lack those facilities. I told you I went to few of the inclusive schools. You know, we piloted Ghana, we piloted inclusive education, and now actually we are no more piloting. We are now in full scale.
Okay.
But still those challenges are there.
But
the facilities.
In University of Cape Coast, for instance, you find blind students who walk to the lecture theaters themselves. They have their own, they have their units where they have access to their brailles and they do everything themselves. So
They are just coping because they have no option. Because right now you have a number of gutters that are not covered. So they go, but what they do is, like Doc indicated, they rely a lot on their friends, and then the senses, the sound, and they are very, very sharp. I've worked with them and I can tell you that they are very, very sensitive to noise and all those things. So because they know the facilities are very, very limited, they are also very strategic in whatever they do. Maybe you put them in a new environment, they struggle 1-2 months and they are used to the environment. They have their own ways of marking. Yes. Okay. So you can see that they walk straight to their lecture rooms and all those things, but they have some pictures in mind. But when you put them at a different location, they are lost.
Struggle.
Yes. Okay. And again, those with wheelchair and the other things, they still struggle. University of Cape Coast, I don't think the lecture rooms, they have lifts and other things to take in. So they still rely on their friends to lift them to their classrooms. One of the inclusive schools I visited in Dodowa, one of the teachers then, is one who used wheelchair, physical disability. And the classroom, the stairs, I don't know, very, very high. So I asked him, how do you assess your class? He said the students will have to lift him up before he can access his classroom. So we are actually, they will tell you they are progressing, but the pace at which we are progressing is
slow.
very, very, very slow. The landscape is nothing to talk about.
Let me come to you, Mrs. Afran. You are the regional director for Perkins. And so what is Perkins doing in Africa? And how do we ensure that we get to this goal that we have?
Okay. So based on the challenges that they elaborated, I think the challenges are all over the continent. You meet these challenges in almost every country that I have had the opportunity to visit. The bottom line is that I'll use an example. In Malawi, Perkins is already working with the ministry, and why I say the ministry is that once you involve the government in most of the things you are doing, you are rest assured that they will put systems in place. Yes, and with the support of all these NGOs pushing, advocating for the rights of people, things will be done. We have what we had early grade reading, and then now we still have like the improved form called the National Reading Program, which has been scaled in all the 31 districts in Malawi. And what we are doing is that we are ensuring that whatever they are doing in the area of reading, I mean, people with visual impairment, those who are blind are getting all these materials in Braille format. Those who have low vision are getting it in large print, and even providing the magnifiers and other things to support them in the classroom. Those who are deaf or hard of hearing are also getting their fair share, where sign language interpreters and all that are supporting to ensure that they also are part of the process. And of course, the other disabilities, people who are in wheelchair, you know, the enrollment has also increased because it is a national activity that is being done. And I think these are some of the things. One key thing we are doing, and called the Braille Cup, is that we are promoting literacy, and we do a competition in reading, and currently we've done it in 5 countries. Ghana started it in 2012. Now it's been done in South Africa, it's been done in Nigeria, Malawi, and Uganda. And still, people are still demanding that they want to do that, because that is a way of also promoting inclusive education as well, because reading is for everyone and nobody should be left behind. In Uganda, we had what we call the School Health and Reading Program, which is something that we had. We provided assistive devices. Even in Malawi, assistive devices have been provided. In Ghana, we had the All Children Reading, and we worked collaboratively with the Special Education Division and then the Ghana Blind Union. And all these things were supported by USAID, even in Malawi and Uganda. And so our donor partners are also doing a great job to ensure that we promote inclusive education, like I mentioned UNICEF. But on Perkins' part, what we are saying is that we see that as much as we are looking at inclusive education, that is the key thing, some people are also kind of being left behind. And we are looking at the fact that there are 50% of people with visual impairment who have additional disabilities. And children with multiple disabilities, most of them, if you are severe or profound, might not even have the opportunity to be there. And so what we are doing is that we are saying between now and 2030, we want to train 1 million teachers to support this 50%, which is about 6 million children with multiple disabilities and sensory loss out there, who do not even have the opportunity, you know, to be able to acquire the skill and other things. So we are pulling this together, and we are looking forward to working with governments and other agencies to come and support us together with, you know, Ghana Blind Union here, other organizations across the globe, to support us to train teachers in both the inclusive and special ed, you know, schools, to support these learners, because you can have a child who stays next door who needs to go to school, but if a teacher doesn't have the background,
the requisite knowledge,
then it's a challenge. So we've this first course is a foundation course that all other teachers can take.
All right.
And that will be helpful.
I don't
for
think we
us.
can end this topic and we can exhaust everything in it.
Yeah.
But I believe that we are going to create another session where we'll look at it, because it is very important. I love the part where we're looking at the causal factors and the things that we normally attribute to spiritual forms and everything, which is very much important. But let me take your last words in some few seconds. Doug, what will be your last words before we reconvene for the next session of this topic?
Well, I'll say the way forward is that we should look at how we use technology to improve the situation.
Okay.
I believe that technology can do a lot for us as persons with disability. It can help us access more information and access more infrastructure. I think that technology is the way to go. It's the way for inclusiveness into the world. So I think we should be looking at that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Mrs. Alberto?
I would say disability is part of society, and whatever we want to do, we should also think about persons with disability right from the beginning to the end, so that disability will not be afterthought.
Okay.
So I see inclusion as something that everybody and everyone belongs, and so we all need to support. And I want to end with a quote. Lizzie knows I like that quote by Helen Keller, which says that alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. So governments, donor agencies, NGOs, everybody should ensure that they join us to promote Agenda 2030, where children with disabilities who are out of schools will be enrolled and also participate in the system, so that they can live independent lives in society.
All right. Thank you very much, my great panelists, for this insightful discussion. And like I said, we would have to really reconvene for the second edition of this topic, because there are lots of things that we need to look at and make the entire continent understand the issues thereof in disability, and also what it takes to ensure that we have really an inclusive educational system where we are addressing the needs and not just saying them by word of mouth. So we appreciate your time that you've spent with us, and we know that when we call on you for the second time, you will gladly come and share your knowledge with us as well.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
So to my viewers, it has been AAU Talks, and today we were looking at special education. We're also looking at inclusive education, specifically people who have some form of disability. I know you joined us throughout the discussion. You have also learned one or two, or I don't know, so many things that you didn't know from the beginning. I have learned a lot. I don't know how much you have learned. And just as I said, this is the part one of this discussion. We'll reconvene for the second session, where we'll look at the inclusive education in full detail. How can we achieve it by the 2030 that we've set for ourselves? This has been AAU Talks, and my name is Kwesi Sam. I was your host for this segment, and what I want to share with you is that, hey, keep on watching AAU TV, because we have nothing but the best for you in the space of higher education. See you same time next week.